sufferer myself. I've been hospitalized for over 30 days and have had multiple medications fail and succeed, as well as I've been treated, I think by 13 or 14 different therapists. It's been a lot. Multiple different modalities, and I also treat mental health patients, and I've prescribed mental health medications and helped people get things back on track. So nothing that I say in this time that you and I have together can be official medical advice, because you and I haven't met in meat space, right? But everything that I say you can use for self-care, and I really highly recommend that you use the very real evidence-based resources that I put down in my description, unlike a lot of the videos, ASMR or otherwise, that you see touting, depression-related stuff online. I use things that actually have an evidence base, and I suggest them, and that's partly because of my medical school training, right? Things working is important to me, evidence is important to me, science is important to me. So, so I try to share with you things that work or that I believe will work. And we've talked in the past about CBT, about Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, and I have contacted different psychologists to actually help me get you the things that will benefit us all the most. And today I wanted to spend a little bit of time tapping, just so that we can relax, and talking about some different DBT principles. So, what do you think? It's your turn to talk now. I've talked a lot. Yeah. I'm listening. I don't want to make it too loud. So how long have you been feeling that way? Okay. And what other treatment modalities have you tried? So all the pots that I'm going to be tapping on today and trying out their different sounds have all been made by my husband, actually. We are trying to start a pottery shop to help fund a clinic to help the needy in Paraguay. And my Patreon goes to help us save up for that too as well. And of course goes to normal living expenses type things, but that's the goal. The goal is to one day be healthy enough. And then I have contingency plans in place, of course, for if I'm not healthy enough, how we can use the money to get a different doctor in Paraguay too. So, but my plan is to get there no matter what. So even if I have to, be in a wheelchair or something like that, I will get there. I've been working on this Paraguay dream since I was 13. I'm 12 maybe. I've wanted to go to Paraguay for a long time. Alright, so it's my turn to talk. I'm holding the talking cup. I'm going to put that over there. And do you have the handout from last week? Okay. It's the same one, but we're just going to go on to a different chapter. So we've talked before about self-destructive coping skills, right? About coping skills that aren't helpful in actually making you feel better, right? And those kinds of coping skills, they'll help you feel better in the short term, but then in the long term, you don't actually get better, right? Yeah, and that's not good. So we made a list of those self-destructive coping skills, right? And then we also talked about how to find good coping skills that can help you be healthy and help you be happy, right? Well, because I want you to feel better. I may not personally know you, or maybe I do, but I know and really believe, and this is a worldview thing, like some people don't have this worldview, but I have the worldview that every single human being was put here for a purpose, for a special and unique purpose, and that you have something important that you exist to accomplish, that you're an endangered species, you're the only one of you. And I have scientific evidence to back that up. I mean, you are the only one of you genetically. The combination of factors that contributed from the dawn of time, from the dawn of man, from all of the different ancestors and all of the different winds of fate that cause different people to meet up and then eventually breed and then eventually make you, right? All of those different factors, I mean, have created something and somebody that is completely unique. And I believe that uniqueness and diversity is valuable because it is, because something that's valuable is something that's rare, right? Value may be subjective, but my value for you is very objective. You are a rare thing, and there is no one else like you, and so I want you to live. So if you're struggling with suicidal ideation or anything like that right now, I really, really, really want you to use the crisis text line that I have down in the description. It frustrates me when people are afraid to do this because it's confidential. No one will know. Your parents won't know. Nobody will know. Okay, unless somebody is using your phone. But you can also text through, a Google account. You can go into Google online, and I'm not trying to teach you ways to bypass. The best thing, if you are young, the best thing you can do is talk to somebody in your family, right? Have an open relationship with your parents, with everybody else. Okay. If that has failed, if you've tried to have an open relationship with your family and they're not taking the depression seriously, you still have to take it seriously. And so I'm saying you could use a Gmail account. They have the ability to do different calls and things like that. Certain Skype accounts have the ability to do free texting, I think, to certain numbers. And there are certain free texting numbers you can get online so that you can text secretly and privately, okay? So that you're okay and you're taken care of. And honestly, families that don't care very much about whether or not you kill yourself probably aren't checking your texting history. Just being super honest on that. So please don't harm yourself. And when you feel like self-harming, we gotta find other techniques you can use, like running really hard or punching a pillow or doing a lot of push-ups or drawing really angrily can sometimes fulfill the feeling of cutting. Other things that you can, because one thing is these terrible things that happen to you can also be used as tools. So there was a woman named Corrie ten Boom in Nazi Germany who was hiding Jewish people in her home. She and her father, who was a clockmaker, and her sister, and they were all rounded up and taken to a Nazi concentration camp. And yes, this has everything to do with you. Just a moment. So, they were rounded up and taken to a concentration camp. And the one sister, Corrie, was kind of feisty and angry. And the other sister, Betsy, was always very, sweet and gentle. And kind of one of those people that you just know isn't going to be long for this world because they're kind of too good for it. So Corrie and Betsy were trying to figure out, and they were both older women at this point in time. I think they were both at least in their 30s or 40s, maybe later than that. They might have been in their 50s and 60s. The father was in his 80s and did not make it alive outside of the concentration camp. To my I know he died either in the concentration camp or before arriving. And obviously men and women were split up in these camps. So Corrie and Betsy was trying to find out a way to be grateful in all circumstances. And I mean, you can think this is a horrible situation they're in a concentration camp. What are you going to find to be grateful for? And they found little things to be grateful for over and over again at various points in time. However, the bunks in which they lived had terrible, terrible, terrible fleas. Oh, and by the way, you can get all of these pots anywhere if you want. Not anywhere. I don't know why I'm saying that. There's an Etsy link. You can get them, but for now, just enjoy their tapping and their sites and spend time with me, okay? Don't go anywhere right now. Right now, just hang out with me. Later you can get one for yourself and enjoy, and we can drink tea together or something. But right now, listen to my story, okay? So, Betsy and Corey had to deal with enormous amounts of fleas in their barracks, and it was terrible. And Betsy said, Corey, we have to find a way to be grateful for the fleas. Because, they're trying to do, according to their faith, right? They were Christians who believed in saving Jewish people. But, in addition to trying to save their faith, there's also an aspect of trying to keep your spirit alive. Anne Frank didn't make it out of her situation because these are overwhelming, horrible situations, and a lot of, the stuff that I read in her biography was very much like, well, at the end, like, her spirit broke because they were so terrible. And so in these horrible situations, and you can't fault anybody for that, you may be at a place where you feel like your spirit is breaking. These two ladies, one way they preserved their spirits was with this really weird gratefulness exercise. Okay, it's very strange. But the idea was to try to be grateful even for the fleas. So they started thinking about it, and Betsy was just praying, like, thank you, God, for the fleas. And Corey was like, this is really difficult and strange, and they had found so many other things to be grateful for, and that helped to keep their spirits alive. I like Viktor Frankl's logotherapy a lot, his psychological techniques, because he also has tested them in a concentration camp, right? Psychological techniques, a psychological technique works if it kept you from being super depressed in a concentration camp. Obviously these people weren't happy in these concentration camps, but they were able to survive mentally, because a lot of people couldn't survive mentally. Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist in a concentration camp who tested all of his theories of logotherapy with his experience. I highly recommend, I have a link below, it's not an affiliate link, to getting his book. Highly recommend it, because you want to use stuff that works, okay? And there's nothing works as well as something that's been tested in battle, right? The battleground of the mind. People weren't just tortured physically. They were put through, the idea was to break the human spirit. And again, it's no fault of anyone if their spirit did break. That was what was meant to happen, right? But there are techniques that people use to help them survive. So Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, his main technique was to find a purpose, and he would visualize things, which is a similar technique to what a pain psychologist I saw used to treat prisoners of war and ex-prisoners of war. And what one of the guys would do was visualize, his daughter was 4 years old at the time, but he would visualize walking her down the aisle, and that was something that kept him up through torture and everything else like that, so that he didn't break. So, it's a technique that works. And Viktor Frankl did the same thing. He would visualize his wife in just moments of utter pain and beating and despair and everything else like that. And sometimes, everybody's technique isn't going to work for everybody else. But one thing that Viktor Frankl's techniques had in common, this is one of my favorite ones. I love this deep color. I love that. You can have it if you want. But one of the techniques that, basically that technique of finding a purpose for the suffering, that was something that's similar to what Corey and Betsy were doing, basically. Because they already knew why they were suffering. It was because of something good they had done. But sometimes that's not enough to bring you through, right? So they used this gratefulness technique, which is in some ways similar to the visualization technique, because they personified it, right? They talked to God. They had a personified image of somebody that they were doing this for. So anyway, the gratefulness technique, it's adjacent to, it's not the same as the logotherapy technique, but definitely worth studying all of them. It's worth studying the logotherapy technique. It's worth studying visualization, like the prisoner of war soldier, American soldier that I mentioned, and it's worth studying the gratefulness technique. And so what they did, what they realized one day, so because they had been spreading subversive messages about the love of God in the barracks, and if they did this outside of the barracks, the nasty female guards would come and beat them or kill them. And they wondered one day, Betsy and Corey did, why is it that they leave us alone when we're in the barracks? And the reason was the fleas. And so Betsy said, see, Corey, I told you there was a reason to be grateful for the fleas. Yes, I'm sorry, this is going to make me cry. Because I don't know what the fleas are in your life. I don't know what the horrible things are that are making your life difficult and unbearable and making it difficult for you to sleep at night. But there may be not just a way for you to think and see it in a different light. It may not just be about seeing it in a different light and seeing that flea as a good thing. Because they were still bothered by the fleas, but they saw it as a good thing. But it's not just that they saw it as a good thing, it's that it was a good thing. The fleas were allowing them to spread these messages and encourage people in really dark and horrible times and help people to make it through, right? Things that they weren't allowed to do because people in the concentration camps were supposed to believe themselves less than human. That was a goal of the Nazis, to dehumanize. So they were called all kinds of things. And so even keeping that idea of, yeah, I am a human, I am alive, and I'm worth it. These kind of ideas, the idea of being loved by God, these things that they were spreading in the barracks, they were important, and the fleas were necessary to let them continue doing that. And I don't know what the fleas are in your life. I don't know what the things are in your life that, actually are horrible right now, but in the end might be good things. So, coping strategies, right? That story is about coping strategies, right? Coping strategies that work, and about the reality of your value in your life. So, I wanted to talk about something called radical acceptance. That's in this same chapter. We're going to go to page 10. Can you go ahead and open up to page 10? Absolutely. I like this one. I think it looks like a dog. I think it looks like a dog's fur. My husband does not think so. My friend thinks it looks like a beach, but I think it looks like a dog's fur. Are you on page 10 yet? Fantastic. So, the first line, increasing your ability to tolerate distress starts with a change in your attitude. And that seems really forceful and annoying. I don't like the way it talks, but radical acceptance is a helpful principle. It's one that I fight a lot. So sometimes, so there is some evidence that the angrier you get, or the more unhappy you are about your pain, the worse your pain gets. Physically, getting angry and upset over a situation can also make it worse, right? So it's difficult to control that, right? You can't just control that. But one of the DBT principles really follows the CBT principle that your thoughts can influence your feelings can influence your actions can, and it can circle, your actions can influence your thoughts, your feelings can influence your thoughts, right? So if we can attack some point in the circle, we can try to help you with your really, really tough and difficult feelings, right? You may feel that you're not worth it because, like, you're not in a concentration camp, or you're not suffering something that's worth suffering for. But I'm telling you right now, the fight for your life is the most primal and basic is the first chronological commandment ever given? Is, be fruitful and multiply. Exist, right? Exist. And so your fight is worthwhile because you are protecting an endangered species, okay? And because there is something you have been put here for. You are here because there's something you're supposed to do. You're supposed to help the rest of us in some way. And if you die before fulfilling that purpose, it's very tragic. So the point of your entire existence is to find the one who loves you. I don't mean like a girlfriend or boyfriend. I mean something deeper than that. It's to find out that you are loved and understand that you are loved and love that back. And second of all, to fulfill a purpose that only you can fulfill and only you know. Okay? This is very, very metaphysical, but it is very, very true. Okay? So it is worth fighting, and the techniques that I'm using are the scientific techniques, like DBT. There's several studies, quote, cited in this particular, like I think even just on page 10, various 2003 studies about the effect of anger on pain. So the strong emotion doesn't make it better. So we have to figure out what can make it better, right? So basically being overly judgmental of a situation or overly critical of yourself can lead to more pain, which can cause you to miss details and be paralyzed, right? That's where we get the blinded by rage, right? You've heard that term before, I'm sure. Of course you have. This is my favorite one. I love the shape of it. I love the feel in my hands. It's actually, you can't quite see, it's actually bluish against the brown, almost purplish in real life. It's really gorgeous. So to try to figure out what we can do, let us try the technique of radical acceptance, which essentially is the opposite of being critical of the situation. It's to try to think of ways to not be critical of the situation. So we'll go to the handout a little bit. So, keep in mind, okay, so to review, obviously getting angry, upset, or critical doesn't necessarily improve a situation, so what else can you do? The other option, which radical acceptance suggests, is to acknowledge your present situation, whatever it is, without judging the events or criticizing yourself. Instead, you recognize that your present situation exists because of a long chain of events that began far in the past. For example, some time ago, you or someone else thought you needed help for the emotional pain you were experiencing. So a few days later, you either bought the handout book, which is linked below, by the way, you can buy it, again, not an affiliate link, or I told you about it, I read the handout to you, and gave you part of it for free online. Anyway, so you got access to this book. Then today you thought about reading this chapter, and eventually you sat down, opened the book, and began reading. Now you are up to the words you see here. Denying this chain of events does nothing to change what already happened. Trying to fight this movement, or say that it shouldn't be, only leads to more suffering for you. Radical acceptance means looking at yourself and the situation and seeing it as it really is. Keep in mind, radical acceptance does not mean that you condone or agree with bad behavior in others. So, I will try this for myself. I will work through it in front of you. Or actually, they have a good example so that I don't have to do that. I'm off the hook. It does mean that you stop trying to change what's happening by getting angry or blaming the situation. For example, if you're in an abusive relationship and you need to get out, then get out. Don't waste your time and continue to suffer by blaming yourself or the other person. That won't help you. Refocus your attention on what you can do right now. This will allow you to think more clearly and figure out a better way to cope with your suffering. So part of that, I would love it for you to go back to the CBT handouts and look up action plans, because that's another way for you to cope with your suffering is you make an action plan, but sometimes you're too emotionally distraught to make an action plan, right? Too frustrated and unhappy, and it's too challenging. Well, that's gonna mess up my green screen, so I'm running out of space to put pots. This one has this cool, like, almost like waves on a beach, and this beautiful bright brick red inside. So sometimes you are too emotionally distraught to make a good action plan. So then what do you do? Right? What are you gonna do? So that's a time to use radical acceptance, right? It's a time to accept, like, hey, this is the situation I'm in. This is the real, actual situation I'm in. And so there's some examples of coping statements that you can use as an example. Okay. And then I'll work through an example of my own life. So radical acceptance is probably the most difficult psychological technique for me because I am a fighter and I'm also by nature very angry. Okay. I've always been a fighter. I've studied multiple martial arts that I now suck at because of my physical condition. But I've always been a fighter. So, to help you begin using radical acceptance, it's often helpful to use a coping statement to remind yourself. Below are a few examples and spaces to create your own. Check the statements that you would be willing to use to remind yourself that you should accept the present moment and the chain of events that created it. You don't have to take all these statements. And I didn't when I first worked through this handout. There were several of them that I felt conflicted with my central worldview. So then, in the next exercise, you'll begin using the statements that you chose. I think I can put this here. So, this is the first coping statement. This is the way that it has to be. I know, that's so against. And again, you don't have to use that one if you don't want to use that one. I struggle with that because when I think about, one thing that I struggle with a lot is how is my whole situation in the military, right? How my health has deteriorated so that I wasn't able to do a fellowship that I wanted to do. I couldn't even do the residency that I wanted to do. I was able to get sexual assault training, which was phenomenal. But when I was taking care of sexual assault patients, I'm, in Fort Hood, and it is definitely a systemic problem. I mean, not a single one of my rape patients in my unit when we went to Korea, and then in my unit at all, not a single one of them felt safe filing unrestricted because they knew that they would face retaliation. And people who even filed, I had a patient who just filed a sexual harassment complaint, and because she filed it against some pretty vindictive and powerful people, they then created an adultery charge against her to get her kicked out of the army in retaliation. And because she filed it against, like, one of their friends was the sexual harassment complaint, and it was this person. There were 4 different. After she filed this, there were 3 other people who were affected. Some people that he had even put hands on, according to these multiple people, and some of them were people under him, so they didn't have the power really to stand up or say anything. So there was a lot of stuff that I watched, and it was frustrating because nobody will believe. People would joke about blowjobs or I don't know, Monica Lewinsky or other things like that at work in ways that were really like property controlling, like women need to shut up and just kind of be. There's some bad environment issues, and a lot of the time people wouldn't none of these women felt comfortable that they would be believed, And especially not when you see what happens to people, where if you file a complaint, you are then going to be accused of adultery and kicked out of the military for something that happened to you. So another woman had such severe, this was not one of my patients, this was one of the other people in another female person who filed who filed secretly, right? But somebody else who was angry at her saw the event, and even though it was a non-consensual event, did nothing about it, and then reported her for adultery. And the woman who had experienced this event, it was so severe that she had permanent jaw problems afterwards. And she was accused of adultery and actually given a reprimand, even though, even though this event had happened, and she couldn't. So the adultery charge is frequently used to retaliate, because it's difficult to prove. You just need somebody to make claims. And like I said, the person did nothing to help her. The person didn't stop the event. They said nothing, they did nothing, which is pretty terrible. And then they used it to their advantage, because it was somebody that she had not gotten along with. So in this whole mess, right, there's little me. This is ancient jasper and seaweed. Look at this neat bowl. It looks like it came from Bronze Era something. So to me, the statement, "This is the way it has to be." So basically, I was taking care of people, and I yelled at someone for how we were taking care of our sexual assault patients. You can see my comedy video about that on this channel, my ASMR video about that, but about my experiences with that and some of my experiences in Korea. But I yelled at a couple people for not treating my patients well. That's it, just yelled. But because I yelled at someone who was high-ranking, and I yelled at someone else who was connected, they tried to get me a GOMAR or reprimand, which they didn't succeed in doing, because there was no evidence for some of the stuff they accused me of, because all I did was yell at somebody. We had another soldier, so I took care of everybody. I was the doctor for the unit, so I knew everybody's secrets, right? We had somebody else who had multiple proven, we had the texts of him harassing his junior female soldiers and soliciting them for sex, or if not soliciting them, I don't know, it wasn't, I knew some extra details, I think, that weren't in those cases. I have to be careful how I say these things. What was proven was harassment, multiple times. So anyway, this person had multiple, proven things against them, and they never got offered to be kicked out of the army, but my person, because she filed a sharp complaint, they're trying to kick her out. The 7 rape victims that I took care of in Korea, not a single one of their people, not a single one of their victims is going to get justice, and not a single rapist is ever going to get so much as a restraining order, because of the culture of fear. Meanwhile, I left Korea in big trouble because I yelled at a major who was very high-ranking, right? Because it's more important in my unit whether or not you yell at people, or at least in the Fort Hood culture, right? Whether or not you yell at people is more important. And these things made me really angry. And of course, the Forcecom investigation has confirmed this, that the entire unit has serious problems. And even my general was suspended, and things like that. Although the general was never bad to me, that I know of. But, apparently it's something that's all the way up and down the chain. So to me, the statement, "This is the way it has to be," it's not true. Because this is not the way it has to be. People could behave differently. People could do the right thing. and they should do the right thing. My rape patients should be treated differently. And that should be a priority over whether or not you raise your voice at someone. Maybe it's not very nice to raise your voice at people. And I have spent, that's another reason this is the way it has to be. A statement is difficult for me because I've spent hours and hours, nights and nights trying to think of how I could have done any of these situations differently, like what I could have done. And that goes for babies that I saw that were under someone else's license that died, that I felt like I could have tried to, I don't know, you know, like there's a lot of things where it's like, what could I have done, right? But the way to reframe, the way radical acceptance could help me in this situation is understanding that this is the way it is. I can keep thinking about these scenarios all I want, about how I want it to be just this way, about, you know, how somebody else should have done something different, how I should have done something different, blah, blah, blah. But that's not going to change that this is the way it is. And that's the next statement. All the events have led up to now. That's what's happened. The now is now. I have to accept that now is now. I can't live in this alternate universe where thinking over it is going to somehow change it. Now, I always justify it to myself by thinking, so this is a really hard exercise for me, so I always justify it to myself by thinking, well, if I can figure out what I did wrong, I can make it different in the future, right? What can I do in the future? And part of it, you know, the problem is the answers often come back to like, I couldn't have done differently. I was incapable of doing differently. You know, the way that things were going in my health and the way that things were going in my brain and the stuff that, you know, while all this was going on, I was battling an insane mental illness where like, every second my brain was like, die. It was crazy. I've never ever had it so bad as it was last year in Korea, where every minute it was like, you should die, loudly in my head over and over again. I was like, please leave me alone, because part of my brain is already taken up with trying to handle the fibromyalgia pain. Part of my brain is taken up with like the tragedy and the travesty of the unfairness that I see going on, where like soldiers are not as important as numbers, so there's supposed to be loyalty to some imaginary big army over the soldier. You know, we would do things that didn't even make sense to our mission. You know, if our mission is supposed to be to defend the South Korean principle, why can't we prioritize our walking blood bank? Why aren't we prioritizing, what are we doing? You know, we're like, it was all the nonsense, and then seeing how, you know, they put my soldier on duty for 16 days straight when actually she didn't have to be. If they had talked to me, I could give, and I told her, you have to tell me when they do this to you, because I can give you clinic days off in exchange. Like, it's not right. She didn't have to be. There were other options. There was just unintelligent ways of using spreadsheets, and it was like, why can't we just treat soldiers right? And the people would not come up with intelligent ways to do things because, oh, you're just a soldier, so they just have to deal with it. Yeah, but there's smart ways that we can do things so that we have less suffering and we have more wellness and we are healthier and our soldiers are healthier and mentally healthier, and that way they can beat the enemy. We want to be inflicting pain on the enemy, not unnecessary, pointless pain on ourselves that doesn't have any reason for it. And then, of course, the big thing was the deaths that I had seen, and the death that I saw. There were deaths that I felt were brushed kind of not under the rug, but they were kind of like whatevered, when I didn't think they should be. I felt that they should be treated appropriately and mourned appropriately. And this is Blue Midnight and Seaweed. That's what the label is on there. You know, like they were supposed to, there were things where we could have avoided stupid situations, but nobody wanted to make it better because people just wanted to accept the situation instead of fixing anything. And that made me, and then seeing that, and then seeing what was happening with the huge just unfairness of what was happening with my rape patients, right? I mean, sexual assault is a problem in the military. It's real. It's a real problem. So seeing all of that, while my brain is like telling me I have to die, I couldn't, like, my brain couldn't take it. This is my favorite cup. This one you cannot have, because this my husband made for me. So don't try to buy my cup. It's my cup. I have my eye on you. Wait, actually, is this my cup? This is not my cup. You may have this cup. You may have it. It is for sale. Apparently. Really? I think, is my husband trying to sell my cup? This looks like my cup that he gave me, but it has the sale sticker on the bottom. I will not radically accept this. But, understanding all these events have led to now, saying that to myself, and then the next statement, I can't change what's already happened. It's happened. Once I have a game plan for the future, and once I've written it down, okay, this is what you need to do for the future, or in my case, I don't know. I have no idea. I have spent a year trying to come up with what on earth I am supposed to do for the future, or what I could do if this situation arises again. The only thing I know is, like, maybe I could be soft-spoken like I am with you guys, because I have found, weirdly enough, people do what I say when I lower my voice. I tried this on somebody the other day who was being ornery with me, and so I changed my voice tone. I lowered my voice to my ASMR voice, and then they did what I wanted. And that is really scary to me because I think that it should be about intellectual discourse, and whether or not the idea that I am saying, yelling, or whatever is true, that should be more important than the tone of my voice, but it's not. So people are easily manipulated, and it's scary, and I'm not good at manipulating people. I tell the truth and then I get in trouble. So that's where it's like, I don't know what I can do in the future. Like, should I be more manipulative? I don't want to be more manipulative. I want to be me. But I can't change what's already happened, and it's no use fighting the past. See, accepting that moment and understanding, like, I can't be spending any more sleepless nights on the people who I had, someone that I thought was a friend, who essentially wrote a notice that I was treasonous against the U.S. for saying that I would rather stay deployed in Korea than go back to Fort Hood. Because I really don't like Fort Hood. So I was joking, and she overheard it, and I jokingly said to somebody, I would rather be in communist China than Fort Hood, actually. I wouldn't rather be in North Korea. And I was joking, and it was not a very sensitive joke to what's going on in China right now, or to what's going on in North Korea, but I think most people in those situations would kind of understand it. This was a very privileged young lady who people did what she wanted because she was pretty, and she didn't really have to deal with things a lot. Like, I straight up saw people just take her side for no reason and things, and it was weird. Yeah, I mean, you can be, truth doesn't matter to a lot of people. What matters to people is how it's said, and if it comes from a pretty face, and that is so frustrating. So I've been studying over the last year how to learn to leverage some of that, but I don't like that idea. I don't want to manipulate. I want you to hear me and hear the truth. So, but I thought she was my friend, and she never came and talked to me about this and said, hey, I think you're being a little treasonous against the United States by saying you would rather not live in Fort Hood, which would have made more sense. No, she wrote a letter into an investigating officer about me being treasonous because I said this. It's like, I was joking. Also, clearly I came back to Fort Hood, so clearly I didn't believe that much. I committed high treason. It's like they're making me this, like, sexy rebel that I'm not. I was always a good girl, and then throughout this whole army thing, they've made me into this sexy rebel. Like, oh, you fight with commanding officers, or you, I don't know, want to defect to China or something like that. It's like, I am not that cool. Actually, I'm, just because you tell one captain that they shouldn't be breaking their promise that they made to their troops about like a weekend off for the ones who went and did EFMB, and they lied. Like, people would break their promises to the soldiers all the time. Commanding officers would say this, and then that wouldn't happen. Or they would, soldiers would want a training, and they wouldn't get a training. Instead, they'd be cleaning windows, even though a training would have been more valid to the job we were supposed to be doing, which was getting ready to defend the Korean Peninsula. Like, it was just very silly, and soldiers were going crazy with all of the like repeated lying and all of the backstabbing and all of the other stuff, and yeah, it makes you a little crazy. But and I didn't know how to navigate the system. And so these things will come back. I'll have these memories and I'll be like, am I remembering it wrong? Like, was I thinking about it wrong? Like, was I being taken in? Like, because people would try to manipulate me and say like, oh, the soldiers are just lying to you. You can't trust soldiers, ma'am. That's what the higher ranking NCOs and officers would say. You can't trust soldiers. But when you hear as a doctor the same story over and over again from your patients every single day, you start to be like, okay, every single person who's coming into me is lying about how their command team is treating them. Is that real? Like, that can't be. Is it more logical that there is something wrong with how we are systemically treating the soldiers? Or is it more logical that all the soldiers have created a conspiracy solely to fool me? Like, it's somehow passed through all the ranks? Come on now. Come on. But when I'm tired and in my nightmare state, I start to doubt myself and believe what these crazy people are saying. It's like, maybe I really am treasonous and I shouldn't have said that. I am not treasonous. But I can't. I have to stop that, and you have to stop it too. I'm working through this in front of you to show you, like, it's difficult. I'm only on radical acceptance statement 3 because I'm arguing with them the whole time. But if it's a fact, I cannot change what's already happened. It's no use fighting the past. Fighting the past only blinds me to my present. The present is the only moment I have control over. Okay. I always feel like I'm wasting my time and your time telling you all these things. Once I get to this point in the video, which is like, we're towards the end now, right? I always feel like nobody wants to hear about my stupid stuff. Other people have way bigger stuff going on. I mean, some people have abusive parents. I have good parents. Some people have, people like my rape patients, my survivors, like, they had such more horrible stuff. I have a similar story. I mean, but it's not like that. It's not like any of the ones. It's so minor compared to, my situation was more confusing because there was like this twisted gaslighting mental situation on top of the very little bit of physical. It was really, really effed up, and it really ruined my brain. I mean, it's pretty much when I grew up. It's pretty much the thing that made me realize, like, I don't know crap about the world, and nobody is safe. But again, these are assumptions that you learn. This is something my therapist is really good at talking about. I've had a lot of different ones, and now I have, a PhD trained psychologist with over 10 years. They basically, like medical school, they do this for 10 years. So she knows far better than some of the social workers that have seen me. And, look at this one. This one's pretty. It's got like bluish and it's got these neat little rims. These are gorgeous, aren't they? So, so one of the things she says is, the problem is that your experiences have taught you certain conclusions. And the question is to unlearn those conclusions. And that's a big part of the PTSD treatments that she does for people with PTSD, is unlearning those conclusions. So these are conclusions I have. So that's something we can talk about with CBT and other things. But on DBT, on radical acceptance, the next radical acceptance statement is, it's a waste of time to fight what's already occurred. Because all that nighttime energy, and this is something that makes me sad, is like, but this is like a trick, right? All that nighttime energy that it was spent mulling over what I could have done differently, or what I could have done wrong, or what somebody else should have done differently, and being angry that somebody else didn't do this right. All of that nighttime energy could have been spent doing something right in the present, making a difference now. Of course, right now, I can't. You see what I'm doing? Is right now, I'm trying to fight the past about fighting the past. How dare you, past self, worry so much about the past? You should feel guilty for thinking so much about the past. You see, it's like I'm doing it. I'm doing the bad thing. I'm feeling bad about the past. Me that felt bad about the past and wasted time. My soldier that was accused of adultery after that. She's not even married, by the way. The other person that she's being accused of actually admitted the spouse actually admitted to falsifying text messages and other statements. She didn't do anything, and they're still trying to find stuff to get her on, and she's still being mistreated. And I feel like, what could I have done? And so that's why it comes back, like all these nights last year that I was struggling with trying to overcome and obsessing over the past. What if I could have spent those helping her? But I mean, I did everything I could to help her. When the behavioral health people wouldn't help her when she was suicidal, I actually went to her house, take care of her, even though I was in pain. I did my best. I got her hooked up with a civilian who I work with, somebody, my pastor's wife. So, so I'm Messianic, and I keep the festivals and the Torah, and I believe that we should all be Jewish. But I go to an African Methodist Episcopal church. That's right, an African Methodist Episcopal church, I do. It's a neat denomination, you should look it up. Look, I can worship with pretty much anybody who loves my Yeshua, okay? Anyway, this woman is a trained counselor, this pastor's wife, and she's fantastic and does amazing things for children in the community who've been sexually abused. And so I got my soldier hooked up with her as well. So like I did my best, and then I wrote a letter for her. Like I did my best. But again, this is just me doing the past thing. It's no use fighting the past. It's a waste of time to fight what's already occurred. This is one I don't like. The present moment is perfect, even if I don't like what is happening. I just fundamentally don't believe that that is a truthful statement. Not because I'm fighting it, but because I think that's an unhealthy worldview that can lead to complacency. So I wouldn't check that one. What I would change it to is, the present moment is as it is, even if I don't like what's happening. You know, this is the present moment. Or there's goodness in the present moment, even if I don't like what is happening. There's something I can be grateful for in the present moment, even if I don't like what is happening. Because those things I know are fundamentally true. The next one, similarly, this moment is exactly as it should be given what's happened before it. I wouldn't say should be, because that is, again, the same thing with perfect, like implying a moral standard. I don't think it's very scientific to imply that. I think I don't want to be implying a moral standard on this statement. I would say this moment is exactly as it has to be, given what's happened before it. This is what it is, which that goes back to the other statement I didn't like. This is the way it has to be, but that is a true statement. This is the way it had to be. This is what had to turn out. And of course, if you are a person of faith, especially if you're Jewish or Christian, you believe in a being who has planned these moments or allowed these moments to happen, even if they're terrible. And it's really hard to say that for like truly horrible things. But that being has put you there because you are the only one who's strong enough to survive this and use this to help others. It doesn't make it okay what's happened to you. It doesn't make it okay what they're doing. And this same being is going to punish the bad that's happened to you. This is a being of justice. But this being also has, this moment is as the being knows out of all of the possible timelines, out of the 12 million different timelines that there are. This is the timeline. This is the one where all things can work out for good in the end. Because you have to remember, this being is battling the interests and the possibilities of millions and millions of different life forms. There could be a bug that if you don't get bitten by this bug now, you will not move in the right direction, so that a wind moves a certain way that builds into a different thing, and eventually there's a car accident, right? And that you needed to be bitten by that bug to prevent that car accident for somebody else, or and that's a very small, causality, cause and effect, that all things affect each other. And so if you're Jewish or Christian, you believe that all of these things, this being sees all of these things and is choosing the best one for you in the end, even if it's truly horrible. They're not choosing for bad stuff to happen to you. That's not what they're choosing. They're choosing all the little good moments around all this bad stuff and choosing this timeline. This is not the timeline I would have chosen. I disagree in a lot of ways with the choices that have been made. But I do understand that. I think that's the hardest thing about being a human and suffering, is understanding that and believing that you are loved. I am loved. And somebody believed in me enough to let me be in the situation I am in. And that I can either use what evil has been done to do good things in the future, or I can crumble and be stuck in the evil that's been done. It's hard. This is a hard session. This is hard for me. And it might be hard for you too. It's real difficult. And it's really difficult, especially when you bring in the idea of somebody loving you, but this happening to you, right? When you bring in the idea of all power, I think that makes it the hardest. But the radical acceptance statement is, this moment has been planned for my good, and in the end, it will be worth it. The greater the cost for the item, the greater value it has. So if you are paying a very high suffering cost, it means that the end thing that you are purchasing at the end of your adventure is far, far greater and more wonderful than the things that people are purchasing who don't have the privilege of suffering the way you do. Suffering is a privilege. My fibromyalgia pain is a privilege. And I don't know what I'm purchasing in the end. But I want to make sure my purchase is worth it. I'm not going to pay this high cost and then run away into the gutter without picking up my prize. And that's what happens when you kill yourself. You paid a high cost and then you don't pick up your prize at the end. That's dumb. You get both the suffering and you don't get the thing that you were suffering for. That's not fair to you at all. I can say that's dumb because I've been there. I've been there with the SI. I love these. Look, there's a little, you put a little fossil in it. Isn't that beautiful? I think it's really neat. These are tea cups for tea. Kind of Japanese style, almost. I think we're almost done. Oh, no, I think there's a couple more. This one is white clay instead of the brown clay, and so it makes a different sound. This is much lighter. Hear that sound? And of course the glazes are a different color. These are brighter color glazes. I think the light really doesn't do it justice. Can you see? Can you see this beautiful cup? It's got a fat bottom and a thin top, but the camera doesn't really show that. So radical acceptance, bottom line, you can do it from your perspective of faith, or you can do it just from the perspective of the fact that it's an evidence-based technique. But bottom line, it's accepting the moment. Either accepting the moment because this is the moment that somebody who loves you has allowed you to have because they believe in you and believe in themselves, or accepting the moment because there's nothing you can do about it. That's what radical acceptance is. When you do that, it really does help to clear the mind. But how do you accept? Because it's difficult because you fight a lot, right? So there's other techniques that you can try. So in addition to saying the coping statements over and over to yourself, you can practice it as a coping skill. So using the coping statements that you checked, begin radically accepting different moments in your life without judging them. Naturally, it will be difficult to accept very painful situations, so start with smaller events. Here are some suggestions. Check the ones you're willing to do and add any of your own ideas. Then use your coping statements to radically accept the situation without being judgmental or critical. It really helps to write stuff out, because when you write stuff out, you're engaging both sides of your brain. So you're actually putting the idea into your neurons, and you're also visually seeing it again. And because it's passing through all parts of your brain, it's passing through your motor cortex, your premotor cortex, you got your sensory cortex. You're engaging your whole brain rather than just thinking about it up in your frontal cortex. Writing it out really helps. That's why sometimes you remember things better when you write things out. You're engaging more of your brain, and that's triggering your hippocampus, which is your memory center, to be like, oh, I remember this. She says that she doesn't follow her own advice and write this out. I need a pen and paper. Next session, I will write with you. I will bring a pen and paper and we'll work together. So, use your coping statements to radically accept the situation without being judgmental or critical. You could read a controversial story in the newspaper without being judgmental about what has occurred, even though it hasn't occurred to you. Right? The next time you get in heavy traffic, wait without being critical. You could watch the world news on television without being critical of what's happening. You could listen to a news story or a political commentary you disagree with on the radio without being judgmental. You could review a non-upsetting event that happened in your life many years ago and use radical acceptance to remember the event without judging it. Eventually, the goal is that you are working on this on your own events, like I was just trying to do with my whole mess of life. And accept that this is where you are, and it is okay to be where you are. Even if where you are is bad, because bad is the only way that we know good. Look at this one. This one is beautiful. This one is one of my favorites. You can't see it well because of the light, but it's got beautiful brown and blue. They look way better on the Etsy page. At the end of this, you should go to the Etsy page just to look at the pictures because they're so beautiful, and it'll distract you from whatever else is going on in your life. But there's like blue and brown lines in this beautiful, like, chestnut. I don't know, it's wonderful. So what questions do you have for me about radical acceptance? So remember, you're not accepting or saying it's okay that somebody did something terrible. Similarly with the religious, you're not saying God wanted this evil to happen, because God doesn't want evil to happen. God wants good to happen, and God is playing colossal chess interests don't all align. What is good for you isn't necessarily what's good for me, because, we are all different. If God had made us all the same, like little honeybees, that would be one thing. But because there is diversity in species, in needs, in who we are, because there is diversity, there is a difference in what we all need. And if we all lived in love and the universe wasn't fallen, if we hadn't broken away from the order of balance of the universe with God, then that would be fine. We would all be able to navigate all our different needs and desires, because we would always be laying down ours to help the other person. But we wouldn't be abused, because they would be laying down theirs to help us. When you take turns, everyone laying down their desires to help each other, you don't have problems. The problem is we have a universe where some people are laying down and some people are not. And so people are taking advantage of people, or sometimes both sides won't lay down and they're all fighting each other. So all these terrible, we have a universe of hate instead of humility and kindness, right? And so because of that, that makes it a much more difficult situation, because God loves all of us little hateful beings. God loves the evil people in your life, and God loves you. And God has to figure out what is the best possible outcome for all of you. And you do not come with a low price tag. You are expensive and valuable. And in the end, justice will be done. And it may be that the best thing to happen to these other people who have hurt you is punishment. And maybe that is the only way out to make things right. Or it may be that something else needs to happen. Even evil people are needed for things sometimes. Sometimes there are evil things that people do, and they set other events in motion. Without certain evil events, we wouldn't have had George Washington Carver. Doesn't make the evil events okay. But you and I are way too small to be making those decisions. The decisions you and I need to make are to do the right thing at all times, and leave balancing all of the evil and all the different things, leave that to someone who can actually see all the cause and effect and all the 12 million possible timelines. I don't know why I always say 12, but I feel like there are 12 million possible timelines. That's no evidence, no thought. That's not in any scripture. I just like the number, so don't quote me. So on a metaphysical level, you can take radical acceptance that way, right? Knowing that you are valuable and this moment was set up for your strength, even though it may be an evil moment. There's a verse about the times being evil. Even though these are evil times, you, like Queen Esther, were the one that was chosen to defeat the evil. And it can happen. So radically accept in this moment, I am where I am. And you can either, like I said, do that from that faith perspective, which I think is much more difficult, honestly. I get much more upset when I think about it from a faith perspective, because it feels unfair. Because I'm like, why don't you just fix it? Like, because I have a lot of hatred in my heart. So my thought is, why don't you just strike those people dead? I would like to just boop, and then all the rapists explode in fire. That is how I would handle it. I would be a very angry Old Testament God. And there are moments in time where that kind of thing has happened. But in general, that doesn't happen. Because if that were done fairly, then we would all be eliminated. Because we have all contributed to a very great evil, even if we don't know it or admit it. It could even be in how you use your purchasing power. It could even be in, something that you did to somebody that you thought was small that put them down a path of evil, where they then did something horrible big to somebody else. You don't know. So really, we all would go poof. I would not be a very just God, because I would only have some bad people go poof. most of us are allowed to live and let live. We are allowed to run around wreaking havoc or doing good. It's up to you. It's up to me. And that is amazing and strange. But this moment, this is your moment. So like I said, I think it's much harder from the faith perspective. I think it's much easier just from the very clean, like, hey, this works. Radical acceptance works from a DBT perspective. And you can look up DBT on PubMed, look up different studies about it. They cited in there, a couple studies about how, ongoing, certain ongoing negative feelings about the situation doesn't actually usually make your pain better. And so radical acceptance helps because it helps you to be able to focus on actually making your action plan. It helps you decrease the negative emotion so that you can make your action plan and make your life better and take that next step. So from a just purely DBT perspective, this moment is as it had to be. This moment is as it is. Perhaps even this moment is as it should be. This moment is, I think, is the best way to put it. This moment is. We are here because we are here. Fighting the past doesn't help. So let's take a deep breath. Let's drink a little tea. Let's relax. Let's distract ourselves. And let's find a moment. Let's find the future. You are loved. I hope you have a good night. Next time we'll do something more fun. Radical acceptance is the hardest technique. It's one of my least favorite, but I think it's unfair to leave it out just because I don't like it, and therefore not to share it with you. So there you go. Let me know in the comments below if this was not helpful for you. Don't let me know that. No, let me know if it was helpful. These are really difficult things to fight through. There are not easy answers. Radical acceptance is meant to give you a break so that you can think clearly to search through your answers, right? Okay. Please sleep well. You are so valuable. Do you like this? Okay, I'll tap on one more thing. I can't actually tap on this very well. Oh, I left the best one for last. Oh no. Uh-oh. This is another one made of white clay. I glazed this one. It's got a matte inside, which is interesting. Oops. Alright. You need to go to sleep. Good night. I'm sorry if this hasn't been helpful. I have to present to you with what I have. And I don't want to be dishonest and only include the stuff that I like. And I think it's important to actually work through some of these difficult situations. Also within your faith perspective, because people of faith have horrible things happen to them too. People of faith get raped. People of faith have, depression, and pretending like, that's separate from your psychological identity is completely untrue and false, and pretending like it's just easy and like, oh yay, smiley face, God is good, I'm happy all the time. That's not enough. I mean, you just can't. But through all the terrible stuff that's happened, find the one who will hold you. Find the one who will hold you and be held. You are so loved. You are so loved, little one. Of faith or not of faith. Either way, you're my sibling. You are either my sibling in Adam or you are my sibling in